New York was dressed for Christmas like it had somewhere beautiful to be. Golden lights were strung across the tall buildings, stretching from one side of the avenue to the other like glowing ribbons. Wreaths hung neatly on street lamps. The air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts. And somewhere nearby, a soft instrumental version of Silent Night floated above the traffic and footsteps. People moved through it all with the kind of hurried joy that only December brings. Couples walked with hands tucked into each other's pockets. Children clutched paper cups of hot cocoa in mittened hands, their laughter puffing into the cold as little clouds of white. Families wrestled with too many shopping bags and too many layers of clothing, complaining half-heartedly and smiling anyway. And then there was the man sitting alone at a small metal table outside a café just off Fifth Avenue. Liam Hale, 37, looked like he belonged in a glossy magazine, not in the middle of a winter sidewalk. His tailored wool coat fell perfectly over a dark cashmere sweater. His shoes were polished, his dark hair neatly styled, his silver watch catching the light whenever he moved his hand. Everything about him was deliberate, clean, precise. Everything, except his eyes. In front of him, a small white cup of espresso sat untouched, the crema long since broken. Between his fingers, he turned a silver ring over and over, the way someone might handle a memory that hurts to look at but is even harder to put away. It was a simple ring, elegant, expensive, meant for a woman's hand, meant for her hand. A week ago, he had stood in the lobby of the Whitmore Hotel with that ring in his pocket, rehearsing words in his head. Rebecca had always seemed like the woman people expected to see beside him. Tall, poised, the sort of beauty that drew attention in any room. For 2 years, she had moved easily through his world of shareholder meetings, charity galas, rooftop parties in cities that never fully slept. He had believed genuinely that she was his future, until he saw her, not waiting for him, not smiling up when he walked through the lobby doors, but wrapped in the arms of another man, older, louder, known in their circles for throwing money at problems instead of solving them. A rival CEO whose name often appeared next to his in headlines. Liam had frozen, his breath caught in his chest, while the ring burned a hole in his pocket. He didn't confront her that night. He waited. He waited to see if honesty might matter to her at all. She came home, kissed in his cheek, and lied with an ease that hollowed him out from the inside. She told him about her girls' night, the late cocktails, the crowded bar. She smiled and curled up beside him on the couch as if nothing in her world had shifted. Something in his did. From that moment, a quiet kind of silence had begun inside him. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't break anything. It simply settles in, heavy and cold, and makes a home in the spaces where trust used to live. Now, on Christmas Eve, the city glittered, and Liam sat at his little table and watched it all like someone looking through glass from very far away. Behind him, a couple's laughter burst like a firework. Across the street, a boy hoisted his little sister onto his shoulders to let her hang a candy cane on a towering community Christmas tree. People brushed past him carrying bags, balloons, flowers, lives. No one saw the man with the untouched espresso in the ring. His thumb pressed into the metal, feeling the engraving inside that would never mean anything now. For a man who had everything, money, power, respect, he had never felt so profoundly unnecessary. He leaned his head back and looked up. The strings of lights above the street blurred slightly as the cold nipped at his eyes. His breath rose in soft clouds. Maybe Christmas isn't meant for everyone, he murmured, so quietly that his own voice barely reached his ears. There was no bitterness in the words, just a tired kind of acceptance, like someone finally admitting defeat in a game they never wanted to play. The world moved on around him. Cups clinked, heels tapped, a bus rumbled past. No one turned. No one noticed. Until someone did. A small pair of boots pattered on the icy sidewalk, the steps light and uneven. They stopped beside his table. Liam didn't look up at first, just assumed it was another passerby on their way to somewhere warm. Then a tiny voice cut through the cold. "Mister, are you sad?" His head turned. She couldn't have been more than 3. A little girl with cheeks flushed rosy by the wind, golden curls escaping from under a knitted beanie that had seen better winters, and a faded red dress peeking out from beneath a coat that was a size too big and a season too old. Her mittens didn't match. One blue, one green. And in her arms, she hugged a worn teddy bear whose fur had been loved almost smooth. For a heartbeat, she simply studied him with wide, earnest eyes, as if trying to solve a puzzle no one else had bothered to notice. Liam blinked, caught completely off guard. Of all the hundreds of people who had walked past him that last hour, not one had really seen him. This tiny stranger had. A little, he heard himself say, his voice softer than before. The girl's face lit up as if he had given her the answer she was hoping for. She hugged her teddy closer, then straightened her shoulders like someone introducing herself to a very important guest. "I'm Evie," she announced proudly, "and I'm turning 3 today." Something in Liam's chest loosened. His smile, when it came, didn't feel rehearsed or polite. It felt real. "Well," he replied gently, "happy birthday, Evie." She grinned, a gap showing where a baby tooth hadn't quite decided what it wanted to do yet. Then, with a seriousness that made him want to laugh and cry at the same time, she said, "If you're sad, you can come to my birthday party tonight. Come have party at my place." And just like that, with one small invitation spoken into the winter air, Liam's lonely Christmas night quietly shifted, almost imperceptibly, toward something else, something he didn't yet have a name for. For a moment, Liam just stared at her, sure he had misheard. "A birthday party?" he echoed, the corner of his mouth lifting. Evie nodded so hard her beanie slipped sideways over one eye. She pushed it back with her mitten and pointed happily across the street, toward the darker edge of the park where the lights of the city faded into shadow. "There," she said proudly, "my place. Mommy made it sparkly." Liam followed the line of her little arm. At first, all he saw were bare winter trees, their branches drawn in thin black lines against the pale sky. Then his eyes adjusted, and he noticed it. A faint cluster of mismatched Christmas lights, weak and flickering, strung haphazardly along a low stone wall. They blinked uncertainly against the snow, like a handful of rescued stars. His chest tightened. Could that really be? He whispered to himself. Before he could ask anything else, a breathless voice cut through the cold. "Evie, sweetheart, there you are." A woman hurried down the sidewalk toward them. She moved quickly, but there was a tiredness in her steps that no amount of speed could hide. Her long blonde hair tumbled loosely around a face that might have been young, if not for the thin shadows beneath her eyes. Her coat was too light for the biting winter air, buttoned all the way up as if that might coax a little more warmth from it. In one hand, she clutched a crumpled paper bag. "Mommy!" Evie squealed, racing toward her. The woman dropped to her knees on the sidewalk and wrapped her daughter in her arms, relief passing over her features like a quiet storm. She held on for a second longer than necessary, like someone who knew too well how it felt to lose things. Then she looked up at Liam. "I am so sorry," she said, cheeks flushed from more than just the cold. "She has a habit of wandering off when she sees something or someone. I hope she hasn't bothered you." Liam shook his head quickly, rising to his feet. "Not at all," he answered. "She just surprised me." Evie, still tucked in her mother's embrace, tugged on the woman's sleeve. "Mommy, he was sad," she whispered, not quietly enough. "So I invited him to my party. Then he won't be sad anymore." Color bloomed deeper across the woman's face. She glanced at Liam, then looked down at the snow, embarrassed and exposed all at once. I'm so sorry," she repeated. "She's very friendly, sometimes too friendly." "She wasn't a bother," Liam said softly. "She made my night." The truth of that settled between them. In the glow of the cafe lights, Liam finally took in the details he had missed at first glance. Evie's small boots had tiny cracks near the soles, darkened where the snow had seeped in. The cuffs of her coat were frayed. The woman's gloves were fingerless, her knuckles red and raw from the cold. They were doing their best. He could see that immediately, but their best clearly didn't stretch very far. "I'm Liam," he offered, holding out a hand. The woman shifted Evie to one hip and reached out with her free hand. Her grip was light and cold, but steady. "Madison," she replied. "Thank you for being kind to her. She doesn't meet many new people." Liam hesitated only a heartbeat. Then, without thinking too much about whether it was appropriate or not, he unwound the navy wool scarf from around his neck. Stepping a little closer, he gently draped it over Madison's shoulders, tucking it loosely around her throat. She stiffened in surprise. "Oh, you don't have to do that," she protested, one hand flying up to touch the soft fabric as if it didn't belong to her. "I know," he said quietly. "I want to. It's warm, and you need it more than I do." For a second, neither of them moved. The sounds of the city blurred into a distant hum. Madison's eyes shimmered, not with self-pity, but with a fragile sort of gratitude, the kind that seems afraid of being seen. From the circle of her arms, Evie looked up and declared with complete certainty, "Mommy, it looks pretty on you." Madison let out a small, broken laugh, the kind that crumbles at the edges. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the scarf shifting slightly with the movement. Liam felt something unexpected in his chest, something quiet and warm, pushing back against the cold that had been sitting there for days. Madison began, clearing her throat. "We should get going. Somebody has a birthday party to attend, remember?" Evie wriggled excitedly. "Come, mister, you come too." Her tiny hand reached out toward him, mitten open, invitation obvious. Liam glanced at his lonely table, the empty espresso cup, the ring in his palm. For once, the decision didn't feel complicated at all. He slipped the ring back into his pocket, left some cash beneath the saucer without really looking at the amount, and took Evie's hand. "Lead the way, birthday girl," he said. They crossed the street together. As soon as they left the bright avenue, the noise of the city softened. Snow crunched under their feet, the park stretching ahead in muted whites and grays. Bare trees arched overhead, branches etched in frost. Streetlights flickering weakly through the gentle fall of new snow. "Almost there," Madison murmured, guiding them toward a small alcove where two low stone walls met. And there it was. Up close, the flickering lights looked even more fragile. A tangle of old Christmas bulbs, some cracked, some barely glowing, taped and tied along the stone with scraps of twine and silver duct tape. A blanket was folded over an overturned wooden crate pretending to be a table. In the center waited the smallest birthday cake Liam had ever seen, no bigger than a cupcake with a single pink candle standing bravely in the middle. Beside it sat the crinkled paper bag Madison had been carrying, the scent of warm fried chicken drifting into the cold air like a promise. Liam drew in a breath. It was objectively almost nothing, and yet, standing there, it felt like everything. Madison looked at him, cheeks flushed, eyes apologetic. "It's not much," she said quietly. But she was so excited. "I had to make something." Liam looked down at Evie, dancing in tiny steps on the spot, her face glowing with pride. "It's beautiful," he replied, and for the first time in a long time, he meant every word he said. Evie clapped her hands. "Sit, sit! You're the guest!" He knelt beside the crate. Madison settled across from him, Evie in her lap, teddy bear placed carefully beside the cake like the most honored guest of all. A small matchbox appeared from Madison's pocket. Together, mother and daughter shielded the candle as they tried to light it. The first match failed. So did the second. On the third, a shy little flame finally trembled to life. "Ready, birthday girl?" Madison whispered. Evie nodded, eyes shining. Liam's voice joined Madison's, deep and a little rusty from lack of use, as they sang Happy Birthday into the cold night. Their voices mingled and rose above the stone walls, warmed the hollow between them, and wrapped gently around a 3-year-old girl whose world had just expanded to include one unexpected guest. When Evie screwed her eyes shut, made a wish, and blew out the candle, the darkness rushed in for a moment, then settled into something soft, almost tender. 3 people, 1 tiny cake, a string of failing lights. Liam realized, as he watched Evie giggle and clap, that for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like a man standing outside of life, looking in. He felt invited into this small, imperfect, deeply human moment. The candle smoke curled slowly into the cold air, carrying with it the last breath of Evie's wish. For a few moments, the 3 of them just sat there, listening to the quiet. The city was still out there. Cars, sirens, laughter, life. But here in this little stone alcove, it felt far away, like another world. "Picture time," Madison said gently, breaking the silence. She pulled an old phone from her pocket. The screen cracked in a spiderweb pattern. She tapped it a few times, coaxing it awake, then shifted closer to Evie on the blanket-covered crate. "Come on, birthday girl. And you too," she added, glancing at Liam with a shy, almost uncertain smile. Liam hesitated. He couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a picture that wasn't for a magazine spread, a company brochure, or someone else's idea of what his life should look like. But Evie's small hand reached out, grabbing his sleeve, tugging him closer with the kind of insistence no adult had the courage to use on him. He scooted in until their shoulders almost touched. Evie wedged herself happily between them, teddy bear squished up beside her like a 4th participant. "Say cheese," Madison said. "Cheese?" Evie shouted, throwing her free arm up in the air. Liam didn't even have time to think about what his smile looked like. He just smiled. The screen flashed, freezing them in that tiny, imperfect moment. A man in a $1,000 coat, a woman in a borrowed scarf, a little girl with a world-sized grin, and a teddy bear who had definitely seen more birthdays than candles. They unwrapped the paper bag next. The smell of fried chicken drifted up, rich and warm and almost too big for the small space they sat in. Steam slipped into the chilly air. Madison tried to make it light. "Okay, birthday feast," she said. "One piece each for us and one for, well, we'll see who's still hungry." Evie bounced. Mommy, my favorite, crispy." Madison handed her the first piece, golden and crackling. Evie took it with both hands, then stopped. She looked over at Liam, her excitement slowing into something softer, more thoughtful. Her eyes narrowed the way kids' eyes do when they're trying to solve something that grown-ups have made far too complicated. Then, without a word, she turned and held the piece of chicken out toward him. "You can have it, mister," she said. "This is the best part. Mommy saved money for this. I want to share. It's my birthday." Liam froze. The park seemed to fall completely silent. Snow still drifted around them. The distant sounds of New York still hummed somewhere out there. But in this one small circle of light, all he could hear was his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He thought of the dinners he'd sat through at polished tables, 10 courses long, each plate more elaborate than the last. He thought of the wine he'd been served, bottles older than the woman sitting across from him now. He thought of the way people had laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, how they had leaned in with hungry eyes at the mention of his name and his money and his plans. In all those rooms, in all those nights, not once had anything ever felt as honest as this tiny girl holding out her favorite thing because she didn't want him to be sad. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly tight. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, his voice a little rough around the edges. Gently, he pushed her small hands back toward her. "But tonight it's all yours." Evie studied his face, then nodded, accepting his answer like a promise. She took a big bite, crumbs scattering onto Madison's lap. After a few joyful chews, she broke off a small piece and pressed it carefully to her teddy bear's mouth. "There," she whispered, "you share too." Liam leaned back on his hands, exhaling slowly. Above them, the mismatched lights flickered and wobbled, struggling to stay at the... He didn't feel cold anymore. Not here, not with them, not in this tiny pocket of warmth carved out of a city that had felt like ice only an hour before. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about meetings or mergers or the last message Rebecca had sent. He wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was simply here. Time slipped by quietly, the way it does when no one is watching. The fried chicken slowly disappeared. The tiny cake was reduced to crumbs and smears of frosting on Evie's fingers. The wind grew sharper at the edges, sneaking under coats and collars, but no one rushed to leave. Evie's energy burned bright and fast, like a sparkler. 1 minute she was chatting between bites, the next her head drooped against Madison's shoulder, eyes blinking heavier and heavier. Within minutes, she was fast asleep, curled in her mother's lap, teddy bear tucked beneath her chin. One small hand still loosely clutching the hem of Madison's coat. Silence settled comfortably over the three of them. It wasn't an awkward silence, the kind Liam knew too well from boardrooms and strained dinners. This one felt gentle, like a warm blanket laid softly over tired bones. Madison stroked Evie's hair absent-mindedly, her gaze somewhere far away. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft it almost blended with the snow. "I used to be a preschool teacher," she said. "I loved it." Liam turned slightly, giving her his full attention. "Kids are loud," she continued with a small smile. "Messy, sticky." Her hand paused on Evie's curls. "But they're honest. They love you with their whole heart for no reason at all. That's rare." "What happened?" he asked gently. She drew in a slow breath, as if pulling the memory up from a deep place. "The daycare shut down, funding cuts. We all thought someone would fix it, but no one did. After that, things went downhill pretty fast. No job, no savings. Rent doesn't wait for your life to get itself together." She looked down, shame flickering across her face, even though she had nothing to be ashamed of. "One night, the landlord changed the locks. Just like that." Her fingers tightened slightly on Evie's shoulder. "So we ended up here. I try to make it feel like an adventure for her, like we're camping. She likes the lights and the stars." Madison's voice wavered just a little. "But she's smart. She knows." Liam felt something twist sharply inside his chest. Not pity, he sensed she would hate that, but a deep, quiet respect. This woman had lost so much, and still she had scraped together lights and fried chicken and a candle just to give her daughter a birthday that felt like magic. I lost something too, he said after a moment. His own voice surprised him with how raw it sounded. Madison looked up, meeting his eyes. She didn't push, didn't pry. She just waited. Someone I trusted, he continued. Someone I thought I'd spend my life with. He exhaled slowly, watching his breath blur in the cold. She lied, about where she was, who she was with, about how much I meant or didn't mean. Mentioning Rebecca felt like touching a bruise that hadn't yet healed. I thought what we had was real, he said. Turns out it was just convenient for her, a way to get closer to power, to money. Madison was quiet for a long moment. Snow fell around them in soft, steady flakes, gathering at the edges of the blanket on top of the little crate that had held the cake. Then she said simply and kindly, "People can break your heart." She looked down at Evie, sleeping peacefully. But people can heal it too. The words lingered, hanging gently between them like a truth neither of them wanted to touch too quickly. Liam swallowed, his gaze drifting to Evie's curled body. The tips of her boots were dusted with snow. Her small legs were pulled up, but the hem of her coat had ridden up just enough that the cold could creep in. Without thinking twice, he shrugged out of his heavy wool coat. Carefully, so as not to wake her, he leaned forward and draped it over her legs, tucking it in around her like a shield. Madison watched him, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a small nod. At that exact moment, as if tired of the effort, the string of lights above them flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Darkness settled, thicker than before. Madison sighed, a hint of apology in the sound. "The wires were half broken when I found them," she murmured. "I was hoping they'd last the night." Liam reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and switched on the flashlight. He stood and wedged it gently on top of the stone wall, angling the light downward. A soft, steady glow filled the alcove, washing over Madison's face, tracing the relaxed lines of Evie's sleeping features, catching tiny crystals of snow in her hair. "Now it looks like stars," he said quietly. Madison tilted her head back, looking up at the beam and then back at him. Her lips curved into a small, real smile. "It's not perfect," she said. "No," Liam agreed. His gaze lingered on her, on the little girl wrapped in his coat and her scarf. "But it's real." In that small pocket of borrowed light, with the world outside still hurrying past, Liam realized something. He had spent so long chasing the kind of life that looked good from a distance, he had almost forgotten how it felt to simply sit in the middle of a moment that meant something, even if no one else in the world ever saw it but the three of them. The quiet of their little corner didn't last. It started as a low, careless noise in the distance, shouting, laughter that had too many sharp edges, the clink of glass bottles bumping against one another. Liam's shoulders tensed before the men even came into view. He knew that sound. The sound of people who weren't really paying attention to the damage they might leave behind. A group of young men staggered down the park path, scarves hanging loose, jackets unzipped, cheeks flushed the particular red of too much alcohol and too little sense. They were laughing at nothing, bumping shoulders, sending echoes bouncing off the stone. Then one of them saw the small scene tucked into the alcove. He slowed, elbowed his friend, and pointed. "Look at this," he snorted. "Holiday dinner in the trash." Another one hooted, lifting his bottle in a mock toast. "Hey, princess," he called, eyes raking over Madison and the sleeping child in her arms. "How's life in the gutter? Got any leftovers?" Madison's entire body reacted before her brain could. Her arms tightened around Evie, curling inward, making herself smaller, as if she could fold herself into the stone behind them. Her gaze dropped to the blanket, to the ground, anywhere but the faces in front of her. She had heard voices like this before. She knew how quickly they could turn. Liam moved. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply stood up, stepped forward, and placed himself squarely between the men and the two people behind him. The snow crunched under his shoes as he planted his feet. "Keep walking," he said, voice calm, almost quiet. The tallest of the group snorted. Up close, Liam could smell the beer on his breath. "Or what?" the man sneered. "You her knight in shining armor." "No," Liam replied, meeting his eyes steadily. "Just someone who doesn't tolerate cowards." The word landed like a stone in a still pond. For a second, no one moved. The drunken smirks flickered. There was something in Liam's posture, something measured and unwavering, that didn't match the picture of a man they thought they could push around. It wasn't anger. It wasn't bluster. It was certainty. The tall one scoffed again, but this time he looked away first. "Whatever, man," he muttered, turning off the path. "Let's go. This is boring." They walked on, still grumbling, but their voices retreated into the dark, growing smaller and smaller until the sound was swallowed by the snow and the sleeping city. Silence returned, heavier now. Liam didn't move for a moment. He watched their silhouettes disappear around the bend, then exhaled slowly and went back to sit beside Madison. She was looking at him differently now. There was relief in her eyes, yes, but also something else. Something deeper and quieter, respect, gratitude, a tiny flicker of trust. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. He shrugged lightly. "No one should talk to you like that," he replied. "Ever." The words hung between them for a moment. Evie shifted in her sleep, sighing softly, unaware of the storm that had almost found them. Liam's coat still covered her legs. His scarf lay snugly around Madison's neck. His phone suddenly buzzed in his pocket, the vibration rattling faintly against the stone wall. He pulled it out, intending to silence it, but the lit screen caught Madison's eye. A familiar image filled the background. A gleaming glass high-rise at sunset, his company's flagship building, the Hale Industries logo proudly displayed across its top. Madison's face changed. Her shoulders stiffened. Her gaze flicked from the phone to his coat, to his watch, and then back to his face, as if she was seeing him properly for the first time, but from very far away. "You're not just some guy who likes coffee on sidewalks, are you?" she asked quietly. Liam hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen before he finally locked it and let his hand fall into his lap. "No," he admitted, "I'm not." A small, almost disbelieving laugh escaped her. "You're that Liam Hale?" she asked. "The CEO?" He winced a little at the title, then nodded. "Guilty." Madison looked down at Evie, then back at the dark park. Her jaw tightened, as if something fragile inside her had cracked. "Why didn't you say anything?" she whispered. Liam looked at his hands, at the faint marks where the ring had pressed into his skin earlier. "Because tonight," he said softly, "I didn't want to be that version of me, the CEO, the name on buildings. I just wanted to feel like a human being again. And you two, you made me feel that." The honesty in his voice was simple and bare. Madison watched him closely, searching his face for the smallest hint of pity or performance. She didn't find it, but she wasn't sure what to do with the truth either, so she said nothing at all. She just held her daughter a little closer, while the snow kept falling gently around them. The air shifted after his confession, though nothing around them had changed. Same broken lights, same stone walls, same patch of thin, worn blanket over rough wood. But now there was a quiet distance sitting between them like a fourth person. One made of questions, of old wounds, of all the times people with money had walked into spaces like this and left damage behind. Madison cleared her throat, eyes on Evie's sleeping face. "I don't want you to feel sorry for us," she said, her voice low but steady. "I don't," Liam replied immediately. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped. "I feel honored to have met you, both of you." The words felt too small for what he meant, but they were all he had. Madison's fingers softened in Evie's hair. She didn't answer, not with words, but the stiffness in her shoulders eased a fraction, like someone who was still wary, yet not quite ready to step away. Evie had slumped sideways now, her body sliding from Madison's lap to the bench. The scarf Liam had given earlier was wrapped around her, ends trailing over his coat. Her teddy bear peeked out from under her chin, button eye catching the faint light from his phone. Liam watched them, something in his chest tightening and softening at the same time. His phone buzzed again. This time, he almost ignored it. But habit pulled his hand to his pocket. He glanced down, and the name on the screen hit him like a slap. Rebecca. He stared at the notification, his heartbeat a sudden, heavy drum in his ears. Madison was busy adjusting the blanket around Evie's shoulders, not noticing at first. He opened the message. "Liam, I need you. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. Let's talk." The words were polished, flawless. The exact balance of regret and urgency. He could almost hear her voice in them. The way she used to smooth over uncomfortable truths with charm and practiced vulnerability. A week ago, That message might have pulled him out of any room, any moment. Now, sitting in the soft glow of his phone-turned star, with a little girl breathing evenly beneath his coat and a woman who had lost everything, still managing to create magic for her child. It felt different. He read the message again. His vision blurred slightly at the edges, not from tears, but from the sudden clarity pushing through the fog. Rebecca's world had always been about surfaces, the right restaurant, the right dress, the right people to be seen with. She had cared about how things looked. Madison, by contrast, was trying to hold together a world with chipped lights and a cupcake-sized cake and hands that shook from the cold. But every choice she made was rooted in love. "Everything okay?" Madison asked quietly. He looked up. Across from him, she gently tucked the scarf more securely around Evie's legs. Tired lines traced the edges of her eyes, but her expression as she watched her daughter was soft, unguarded, full of a love that didn't know how to hold back. Liam's chest ached. He glanced down at his phone one more time. The message still waited there, blinking like a tiny, stubborn signal from a life he wasn't sure he wanted anymore. Then, very slowly, as if performing something sacred, he hit delete. The screen asked if he was sure. He was. He deleted the thread. Then he went to his contacts, found Rebecca's name, and pressed block. The confirmation appeared. He accepted it. Just like that, the line between them, carefully maintained for years, was cut. Forever. He let the phone fall gently back into his pocket, the weight of it suddenly lighter. The night grew colder. Their small corner of the park seemed to inhale and exhale with them. At some point, exhaustion wrapped its fingers around him, too. Liam leaned back against the stone wall, his shoulder just brushing Madison's. The last thing he remembered was the sound of her slow, even breathing and the soft, occasional murmur of Evie's dreams. Morning came quietly. A pale blue light crept over the city, turning the snow to a thin, shimmering sheet. The string of broken lights above them hung still and lifeless now. Frost had kissed the edges of the blanket and the stone. Madison woke first. For a second, she didn't remember where she was. Then the cold seeped back into her awareness, along with the weight of her daughter curled against her. She sat up, brushing snow from her coat, from Evie's hair, from the scarf around her own neck. Something felt wrong. The space beside them was empty. No tall man in a wool coat. No careful, steady presence. No quiet, deep voice saying good morning. "Liam?" she called softly, then louder. "Liam?" Only the echo answered. Her heart lurched. She stood quickly, scanning the park, the path, the trees, the benches. Nothing. No sign of him. For one sharp, breathless moment, it felt as if the night had been a dream, a kind one, but still a trick. "Mommy?" Evie's sleepy voice chimed behind her. Madison turned. Her daughter was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. At her feet, tucked carefully into the roots of a nearby tree and held down by a small stone, was a cream-colored envelope. Her name was written on it in looping, elegant handwriting. To Evie, Madison's hands trembled as she picked it up and opened it. A single piece of paper slid out, folded neatly. She unfolded it and read the short message inside. "Evie, you gave me Christmas. Now let me give you home. Liam." Her vision blurred. She blinked hard, looking up, turning in a slow circle as if he might be standing just out of view, smiling that quiet smile. He wasn't. "Stay right here, okay?" she said quickly to Evie. "Don't move. Mommy will be right back." She checked behind the trees, near the path, even toward the street, panic rising with every step. Had he just walked away, left them with a note and nothing else? A honk cut through her spiraling thoughts. She turned. At the edge of the park, a sleek black car idled, exhaust curling into the cold air. The back door opened. Aika. And out hopped Evie, bundled in a warm new scarf Madison had never seen before, her face lit up like sun through clouds. "I found him, Mommy," she called, racing toward Madison. "He was getting something special." Behind the wheel, Liam leaned over and lowered the passenger side window, a wry, gentle smile on his lips. "Need a ride?" he asked. Madison stood frozen, relief and confusion crashing into each other so hard she could barely breathe. She looked from him, to the envelope in her hand, to the car, to her daughter's sparkling eyes. What kind of something special?" she managed. Liam stepped out of the car, brushing snow from his coat. He walked around to stand in front of her, not too close, not too far. "Come with me," he said softly. "Just trust me." Her world had crumbled so many times already that trust felt like a fragile, dangerous luxury. But Evie's small hand had already grabbed hers, squeezing. "Please, Mommy," she whispered. "Come see." Madison took a shaky breath, looked into Liam's eyes, and in them she saw no games, no calculation, only a quiet, steady hope. She nodded once and let him open the car door. The ride felt strangely quiet for 3 people in one car. Evie hummed to herself in the back seat, pressing her nose against the cold window to trace little foggy shapes with her breath. Madison sat beside her, hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Liam drove, eyes on the road, the city gradually thinning out around them. Street by street, New York softened. The tall glass buildings gave way to shorter brick ones. Neon signs turned into warm porch lights. The traffic loosened, replaced by quiet blocks lined with sleeping trees. Snow dusted the sidewalks and rooftops, untouched in places where no one had yet walked. Madison finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Liam glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Not far," he said gently. "Just somewhere safer than a park bench." Her fingers twitched against each other. "We'll have to come back," she murmured. "Our things are still there." Liam thought of the blanket, the crate, the failing lights. His chest tightened. "You won't need to," he answered quietly. The car turned down a quiet residential street, lined with modest houses dressed for Christmas. Wreaths on doors, fairy lights draped across porches, small trees glowing softly in front windows. It looked like the kind of street that existed in snow globes and holiday cards, not in the same universe as stone alcoves in freezing parks. Finally, the car rolled to a stop. Madison stared out the window, not understanding at first. In front of them stood a charming little house with pale siding, a white picket fence, and a wide front porch wrapped in garlands. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows, painting soft rectangles onto the snow-covered lawn. A narrow path, recently shoveled, led straight to a door painted a cheerful shade of yellow. "Where is this?" Madison whispered. Liam stepped out first, then came around to open her door, offering a hand to help her out. She took it, almost on instinct, then released it quickly, as if reminded that such kindness had a cost in her world. "This house," he said quietly, looking up at it. "I bought it years ago for my mother." Madison turned to him, eyes searching his face. "She passed before she could ever move in," he continued, his voice tinged with something old and tender. "It's been empty since then, sitting here waiting. I kept telling myself I'd figure out what to do with it one day." Snowflakes landed in his hair, melted on his lashes. He reached into his coat pocket and drew out a small silver key. It glinted in the light from the porch. "This place has been waiting for love," he said softly. His eyes met hers. "You brought that last night." Madison's hand flew to her mouth. Tears rose faster than she could blink them away. "Liam, we can't." Her voice trembled. "We can't afford anything like this. We don't even have—" "It's not about rent," he interrupted gently. "It's not a trick. It's not a loan. It's a gift." Evie slipped her mitten into Madison's hand. "Mommy," she whispered, eyes wide and shining, "is this our new house?" Madison looked from her daughter to the house, then to the key waiting in Liam's palm. Everything in her life had taught her to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good, too big, too generous. There was always a price, always a catch, always something hidden in the fine print. But there was no fine print in Liam's eyes, only a quiet, steady hope, and maybe a little fear that she might say no. Her hand shook as she reached out and closed her fingers around the key. "Yes," she breathed, the word breaking apart as it came out. "Yes, baby, it's our house now." Evie squealed, jumping up and down, her teddy bear bouncing along with her. Liam let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. For the first time in a very long time, Madison walked toward a front door that belonged to her. Snow crunched softly under their feet as they climbed the porch steps together. One small family and the man whose life had shifted in a single winter night. When the key turned in the lock and the door swung open, warm air greeted them like a quiet embrace. It didn't erase their past, it didn't solve everything, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, on cold December mornings, a beginning is more than enough. Life didn't magically become easy overnight. It never does. But it did become different. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint and dust the first few days. The kind of emptiness that waits patiently for voices and footsteps to fill it. Madison moved slowly through the rooms, running her fingers along windowsills, opening cupboards with a kind of reverence. Evie turned the hallway into a racetrack within the hour, her delighted squeals echoing off the bare walls. Liam watched from his doorway, hands in his pockets, a quiet smile tugging at his mouth. He didn't stay. Not that day, and not the next. He helped carry in a few bags, made sure the heat worked, showed Madison how to adjust the thermostat and who to call if anything broke. Then he stepped back, careful not to hover, careful not to make her feel like this gift came with invisible strings. "I'll be nearby," he said simply, standing on the porch. "If you need anything, or if you don't, that's okay too." Madison looked at him, the key warm in her pocket, Evie's laughter spinning through the hall behind her. "Why are you doing this, Liam?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "Because once someone gave me a chance I didn't deserve," he said, "and I never forgot how that felt. And because last night, you and Evie gave me something I didn't even know I needed." He offered a small smile. "I'd like to spend whatever time I have left trying to give that feeling to other people." Snow began to fall again as December slipped toward January. Liam moved into a modest home just a few blocks away. It wasn't his penthouse overlooking the city, the one filled with expensive art and emptiness. This place had creaky floors, a small kitchen, and sunlight that poured in every morning like a promise. For the first time in years, he chose to live closer to kindness than to power. His mornings changed. On his walks, he passed by Madison Street. Sometimes Evie would appear at the window in mismatched pajamas, cereal bowl in one hand, waving so enthusiastically she nearly spilled milk on the glass. Sometimes Madison would be on the porch with a mug, her hair tied up messily, wrapped in his navy scarf. Sometimes he kept walking, not wanting to intrude, but his steps always felt lighter after. Work changed too. The gleaming halls of Hale Industries felt colder now. Not because the temperature had dropped, but because he could suddenly see how sterile it all was. Where he'd once measured success in stock prices and acquisition headlines, he found himself pausing in the break room to ask an assistant how their sick mother was doing, or kneeling to pick up papers a nervous intern had dropped. In boardrooms, he still talked about margins and projections, but more and more often, he found himself asking a new question. Who does this help? Some people noticed, some whispered, some rolled their eyes, waiting for the phase to pass. It didn't. Within the first month of the new year, he made a decision that startled even his most loyal advisors. He called a press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. Behind him, on a large screen, a photograph appeared. Evie laughing, holding a sparkler in one hand and her teddy bear in the other, the edges of her curls lit like a halo. The EV Light Foundation, Liam announced into the microphone, is a non-profit dedicated to supporting single mothers and homeless children across this city. He paused, swallowing the emotion rising in his throat as he looked at the photo behind him. "It's named after a little girl who reminded me what Christmas really means," he continued. "It's not about presents or power, it's about love, shelter, hope." At the back of the room, away from the cameras, Madison stood with her arms folded loosely, watching. She didn't want the spotlight. He knew that, so he didn't call her forward. But every decision about the foundation, every program, every outreach plan, he asked for her thoughts. He listened when she spoke. He let her heart guide what his money could do. In the evenings, after Evie was tucked into her new bed in her new room, Madison cracked open textbooks at the kitchen table. With Liam's support, but never his pressure, she had enrolled in night classes to finish her degree in early childhood education. It had been her dream before life had shoved her off course. Now she was slowly, steadily finding her way back. "You don't need to fix everything," she told him once, when he offered to pay for more than tuition. "I'm not broken, I just needed a door to open." He understood. And as for Evie, she became a permanent, joyful interruption in Liam's carefully planned calendar. Thursdays became Office Adventure Day. She would march into Hale Industries headquarters like she owned every floor, curls bouncing, backpack stuffed with snacks and crayons. She never knocked on his door, she simply burst in. "Hi, Merry Christmas," she chirped every time, as if it were his real name. She'd climb into the chair across from his desk and lay out her newest drawing. Stick figures with big red hearts on their chests, a yellow-doored house, a woman with long golden hair, a small girl with a teddy bear. "This is you and Mommy and me," she would explain patiently, as if he might forget. "We live together. That's our house." Liam framed every drawing on the wall behind his desk. Executives would pause mid-presentation, eyes drawn to the crayon-colored universe behind him. They didn't always understand, but Liam did. In a world of deals and numbers, he had finally found something that couldn't be bought, measured, or negotiated, only cherished. And he was learning, slowly and tenderly, how to hold on to it. Winter found its way back to the city almost before anyone was ready. Snow came softer this time, more like a whisper than a storm, brushing the streets in a thin white layer that made everything look a little gentler, a little slower. The same café still sat on the corner of Fifth Avenue, its windows glowing with warm light, its tiny outdoor tables wrapped in strings of fairy bulbs that glimmered against the falling flakes. Inside, people cupped hot drinks between gloved hands. Outside, a small heater glowed beneath one particular table, pushing back the chill just enough for three familiar figures to sit together. It was Christmas Eve again. At the very same table where Liam once sat alone with an untouched espresso and a ring that never found its home, he now sat with the two people who had become his whole world. Madison sat to his left, her golden hair pulled into a loose braid that fell over her shoulder. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, but her eyes were warm, lined with the soft tiredness of someone who spent her days on tiny chairs and in bright classrooms. She was a teacher now, officially. Every afternoon, she came home with smudges of marker on her hands, paper hearts in her bag, and stories about the children who already adored her. Around her neck was the red scarf he'd given her that first night, carefully mended where the threads had worn thin. To his right sat Evie, no longer a drowsy 3-year-old in a park, but a proud 4-year-old with legs that swung confidently under the table. Her coat was puffy and new, her boots shiny, her curls a little longer but just as wild. Her teddy bear, still a bit worn, sat on the chair beside her with a tiny scarf of its own, stitched by Madison's hands. The air around them smelled of coffee and cinnamon and something Liam now recognized as contentment. "Close your eyes, Mr. Christmas," Evie announced suddenly, bouncing in her seat. Liam chuckled. "Both of them?" he teased. "Both," she insisted, pointing at his face. "No peeking." Madison's eyes sparkled as she reached into her bag and pulled out a flat, carefully wrapped object. Silver paper, a little wrinkled from small hands folding and refolding it, caught the light. "You heard the boss," Madison said softly. "Eyes closed." Liam lifted his hands in surrender and shut his eyes. The world narrowed to the sound of rustling paper, Evie's tiny gasps of excitement, and the light clink of a cup being moved to make space on the table. "Okay," Evie breathed. "You can open now." Liam opened his eyes slowly. In his hands lay a drawing, crayon colors pressed deep into the paper, glitter glue catching the cafe lights. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house with a bright yellow door. One tall figure in a suit with a big red heart drawn on his chest. One with long golden hair. One small figure in a red dress, holding a teddy bear almost the same size she was. Above them, in blocky, uneven letters, were 2 simple words: "My family." The sounds of the cafe faded. The clinking cups, the soft conversations, the hum of Christmas music. All of it blurred into the background as Liam stared at the drawing. His throat tightened. "Evie," he whispered, the name catching a little on its way out. This is the best gift I've ever received." She beamed. "It's your birthday too, remember?" she chirped. "You get a birthday and Christmas and a family picture. That's 3 presents." He laughed softly, blinking quickly. "Right, how could I forget?" Madison tilted her head, studying his face. "You okay?" she asked gently, though she already knew this was more than okay. Liam looked up at her, then back at the drawing, then down to his coat pocket, where something small and patient had been waiting all year. "I have a gift too," Liam said quietly. He set the drawing down with reverence, as if it were made of glass, not paper and glitter. His fingers lingered on the words, "my family," for a moment before he stood up slowly, the legs of his chair scraping softly against the ground. Madison watched him, puzzled. "Liam?" He stepped around this little cafe table until he stood in front of her. Her brows knitted in confusion. Then, when he reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box, realization washed over her face like a wave. Her hand flew instinctively to her mouth. "Liam." He lowered himself to one knee on the cold pavement, not caring about the snow or the way people at nearby tables were starting to turn and watch. In this moment, the world shrank to 3 people, 1 tiny table, and a question he already knew the answer to but needed to say out loud. He opened the box. Inside lay a simple ring, elegant, timeless, a single diamond catching the cafe's warm light. Not a symbol of status this time, not a prize or a performance, but a quiet promise. "Madison," he began, and already his voice trembled. "1 year ago, I sat right here thinking I had lost everything. I thought the life I'd been building was over. I felt empty, and then you and Evie found me. Then you—" He glanced at the little girl, who was clutching her teddy bear and staring with wide, unblinking eyes. "You showed me what love looks like when it's real," Liam continued. "Not the kind people chase in headlines or rooms full of glass and mirrors. The kind built from shared blankets, cold nights, fried chicken in a paper bag, and a little girl who invited a stranger to her birthday party so he wouldn't be sad anymore." His eyes shone now, unshed tears turning the lights around them into small halos. "You gave me Christmas back," he said, "and you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing, a home, a family." He took a steadying breath. "Madison," he said softly, "will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, everything went utterly still. Madison didn't speak. Her eyes filled too quickly, tears spilling over before she could wipe them away. All the moments between that freezing park bench and this warm cafe flashed through her mind. Car rides and night classes. Evie's laughter echoing down the hallway. The hum of a heater in a house that was finally theirs. She had not been looking for this. She had only been trying to survive. And yet, here it was. A life. A future. A man on one knee who had seen her at her lowest and still looked at her like she was the answer, not the problem. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking on the word, then stronger. "Yes." Evie squealed so loudly half the cafe jumped. She scrambled out of her chair, nearly tipping it over, and threw her arms around them both as Liam slipped the ring onto Madison's finger. "Now I have 2 birthdays, Evie declared triumphantly. "My birthday and the day we get married." Laughter rippled around them. A few of the other patrons clapped. Some raised their cups in a spontaneous toast. Someone called out, "Merry Christmas," and another chimed in, "Congratulations." Madison bent down, pressing her forehead against Liam's as he rose from his knee. For a moment, they just stayed there, eyes closed, breathing the same air, holding on like people who knew too well what it meant to lose. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant for the ring, the house, the foundation, or simply the fact that he had stayed. "Thank you," he whispered back, because he knew without her and Evie, he might have kept walking through a glittering life that felt permanently empty. Snow drifted down around them, soft and silent, catching in Evie's curls and on the worn fur of her teddy bear. The lights of the cafe glowed warmly against the cold night, wrapping their small table in a gentle halo. Liam looked at the two of them, Madison with her mended scarf and shining eyes, Evie with her crayon-streaked fingers and endless laughter, and realized that every part of his life before this had been leading him here. Not to boardrooms, not to penthouses, not to the tallest building on the skyline. To this table, to this moment, to this family. He reached out, taking one of Madison's hands and one of Evie's, their fingers intertwining over the drawing that read, "My Family." For the first time, the words didn't feel like a hope or a dream. They felt like the truth, not in the way the world measured success, but in the only way that mattered when the lights dimmed and the snow fell and the night grew quiet. Home wasn't a place or a house or a name on a company door. Home was 2 warm hands in his, a child's laughter in his ears, and the knowledge that this time, Christmas had come to stay.